Yeah, oh, Joe gets up at 4:30, and he could be asleep already, sure.
Couch looks, the recliner looks nice after a couple of hours of work.
basically, this is all that pertains to us.
Yes, exactly. But the other is just a representation of.
Of nothing.
Can we just be on our own? Not to let everybody else's time.
Apparently it was a hot ticket. I guess.
So I'm just announcing that it's a work session. I'm not saying any of this other stuff. Because it's not,
Let's see what it says.
there is, we didn't do an annual notice.
Yeah, we always reserve these days for, work
Yeah,
session.
she said she can, change a few words, quite a few.
So. This is an informal,
That's what she said. Yeah, that's a good prayer or nothing like that.
and then roll call,
Roll call,
It-
right?
and then prayer,
Yeah, but it was
and
noticed.
silent prayer and pledge, no?
No.
No,
Okay.
usually work sessions now, so yeah.
We call this meeting to order. This is an informal work session of the Waldwick Planning Board, and sorry for the delay, folks. So we can get right into it. After a roll call, please, Joyce.
Ms. Badalamenti,
Here.
Mayor Giordano,
Here.
Mr. Schatz, Mr. Raimondo,
Here.
Mr. Kowalski,
Here.
Mr. Misselwick,
Here.
Mr. Orovitz,
Here.
Mr. Basilico,
Here.
Mr. Canfile,
Here.
Mr. Ward.
Here.
Madam Chair, before you begin, I have to recuse myself.
Thank you. So at the meeting, a couple of weeks back, we talked about coming together to discuss, after reading and bringing up some questions that we might have. Paul is nice enough to be here with us, so we can have him answer more questions. We thank you for your time, Paul. So we
Madam
could,
Chair,
yes,
if we could, just so that everybody's aware of the protocol, this is a work session. Work sessions, although the public is absolutely invited to attend, the public is absolutely prohibited from speaking, period, end of story. There are no comments from the audience, no questions from the audience. If that is not satisfactory, I apologize, but that is the protocol, and it will be followed. Thank you.
thank you. But please feel free to come back on December 4th, because that's when everything will continue to come to fruition. So is it suggested that we go one at a time, or we discuss as it comes up? Who would like to begin with any comments or questions?
Or questions for the planner.
Yeah, for Paul. John, take it away.
Well, I guess, I didn't realize until this evening that there's already a planner. I thought we were making decisions about the future, not something that, there's already a planner with plans that seems to be driving the bus. I thought we were driving the bus, and that troubles me. I still go back to the question that I had the last time. This plan, this redevelopment plan discusses block 107, lots 1, 3, 5, 7 to 11. I would prefer to see lots 9, 10, 11, 13, and 17 be the ones addressed. Because that is the corner of Franklin Turnpike and Prospect Street. That's the most visible. It's the fewest residential properties, which will have the fewest, which will have the least residential impact. It's the most prominent place. And I question why do it in the back here? Let's go to the front.
Good point.
And I'm wondering, is this to appease the planners, or is this to, why are we doing it this way? This just doesn't seem right to me.
I think when we originally heard about it, if I may, it was the whole block.
Yeah.
And then when it came back,
It's
we
the
were
back part.
missing Rite Aid and the store on the corner of Franklin Turnpike and what,
If we're gonna do this
Little
in
Street
a
is that?
phased approach, I would much rather see the commercial entities go through the pain than the residential.
makes sense. Paul, any?
No, I'll just confirm, once again, for the record, the redevelopment area does include the entire block, all those lots. As I mentioned, the redevelopment plan could be prepared for a whole area, for 1 lot, 5 lots. It was the discretion of mayor and council to move forward with this initial section first. There's nothing to be said that you can't make a recommendation to say you prefer it to be done another way. Remember the question, just to get back to the initial questions, you're well aware is the master plan consistency, but there's also the language that says, and any other recommendations that the board deems appropriate. So it's again more of a technical matter than one of the law issues of law that you're dealing with.
Okay. Well, I would say, in my opinion, lot 13, which is the Rite Aid, that corner lot, number 17, 11, and then the empty lots on the corner, 9 and 10, instead of, and leave 1 through 8 for a later phase. That's the least visible from the center of town. Now we're talking about the center of town. And the idea is to make it look pretty and
And still, it's still near the train station. It's
exactly.
still part of that.
And all of the benefits that we're looking to reap, that's where you're gonna get the bang for your buck, not on this back street. My opinion.
Thank you for sharing.
Paul, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Is this the only drawing that you received?
There-
There were comments made at the last meeting that you received preliminary drawings. Because we have a packet from Hohokus Crossings. I'm kind of confused why we have a full packet from Hohokus Crossings, but only,
I don't think
Artist
Paul had
rendering
anything to do with
this.
that, actually.
Yeah, just to be clear for the record, this is the first time I've seen this was this evening, the Hocus
Okay.
Crossings one. The other, I have seen this rendering and concept plan previously. The one that shows the redevelopment area or portion thereof.
where's two-sided? Mine's one-sided.
Mine's one-sided.
Oh, the one my packet had 2 sides, my apologies. Get my copy up.
The packet or the pictures of Hohokus are from Craig, Mark.
What's that?
Um,
I don't have this.
Oh, they only printed the one.
Yeah.
It is on the back here. They only printed the front page.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Craig,
The reason for the Hohokus rendering is just to show what that concept would look like. It's very similar to the style of the building and also the height
Right.
of the building. So I think the dimension was.
Craig
roughly-
shared that with us.
Exactly. So
Yes,
I
sir.
think that's the reason for that Hohokus
Right.
rendering.
that's the reason why we got it.
Unless my counting is wrong, and it often is, I admit. I see 3 stories in Hohokus, not 4.
There's a penthouse. If you go to
Open
A-
air.
A6, which is setback.
I think that's off of Maple on the side road.
The interior block, that's correct.
Yeah, you could see on A6, the 4 stories.
artist rendering on the front doesn't show the third story.
Well,
So I
that-
guess it's entirely invisible from Maple Avenue. I mean,
When you look from the front street on Maple Ave, it looks like it's only 2 stories because they're set back with the third story. It's when you go to the side in the parking lot, you can see it.
that it looms.
It moves, yeah.
Joe, would you like to,
Well, how many units are proposed?
oh,
in this
that's Dan.
example of this rendering here? I don't have the type.
Just gave away the back sheet. The plan had a maximum density of 33 units per acre. So I do the math there. I had a number before. I don't have it in front of me, but it's, we have just under an acre. So make sure I give me the facts correct.
According to this,
On the back.
21 units? Yeah, 21 rental apartments, 6 one-bedroom, 12 two-bedrooms, and 3 three-bedrooms. And a retail space of approximately 4,000 square feet, with 81 parking spaces.
4,000 square feet of retail should be 200 square foot per space that require 20 parking spaces for the 4,000 square
$1?
feet. Under our current
Making
standards.
money on this? The last time I checked
And
was
then
6 cents.
60 are left for the residents?
No, I don't know, no.
That's in addition to?
Not so much.
Thank you, sir.
It says the current C1 requires 120 spots. The proposal is 81. So it's like a 33% reduction.
If I can go back to the initial question about the number of units, I have that because the actual, excuse me, the plan area is over 1 acre. It's 1.278 acres times 33 units per acre. That's a maximum of just over 42 units. This concept plan shows 42 total. So there's 21 in the apartments, if you will, then the other wrapping around Harrison and Frederick are townhouse type units, as well as in the back.
Okay.
Those are each one that you can count them off. They're each an individual unit with the garage, so that's a little less intense style. That it's picture a typical townhouse like you have, I guess, by the Pippo or you've seen elsewhere, where you have the garages right in, or the one Franklin, I believe, is the same.
And the parking is 1.5 units because it's mixed commercial and residential?
Because the idea being it's mixed use between the two, as well as close to the train, so you have transit, so some people may not want to have a car or need a car. So that's a typical to reduce from the 2 units, 2 spaces per unit you might normally have, 2.1. Hence as someone mentioned, a 33% reduction roughly from your RSIS standards for residential.
So will there be on-street parking on Harrison on the other side of the street, not in front of the?
Nothing's being proposed there, but obviously, there's, the lot, there'll be some curb cuts on the east side, as you will, so between the driveways, there should be enough room. The opposite side of the street, there's nothing planned right now. So whatever's there currently would remain.
I guess that's close to the train station, so we have to have meters or something there, right, for certain residential parking?
That would be at the discretion of the mayor and council. Would make sense to have more parking, management potentially for that, if there's demand, like you have at the lot down the street.
Looking at Harrison Ave, and using my paper tape measure to scale, it seems that in front of, from the corner of Frederick, 1, 2, 3, 4 units in, there's no on-street parking because those spots are less than 18 feet, approximately. I'm going based on
Yes.
taking a piece of paper and, because the building says it's 20 feet wide.
Right, you need
Typical
20, at least
parking
20.
spots about 18 feet.
Right.
So then you maybe get 1, 2, 3, 4 over the next ones, and then that's it. And then maybe 2 in front of the rental apartments.
Now, there are driveways out there today, but there's a little bit more distance between
Right.
them currently,
I mean,
so you put
there's
a
a lot
few more
more
spots.
distance between,
Yes.
because I've seen commercial trucks parked on that.
Yes, I have as well.
And I know that you guys, when you did the assessment, had put that in the plan.
Correct.
The other question is, that I have is, as far as, questions, let me get it out. I know it says that it's got a 13.5 foot high garage, according to this drawing. Is that gonna be big enough for a truck, fire truck to get through?
My understanding would be probably would not, and you'd not normally want to bring one in, but that's a site plan issue. This is just a conceptual design that if it's
Yeah, I know.
desired, you.
I'm asking, because questions have been raised.
Yeah, 13, you could, I'm not the expert in this, 13 probably, you could fit a truck under, I believe, at 13. But it's again a matter of whether you're gonna be driving,
Right.
at the time of site plan review, if we get to there, that's obviously a valid question to talk about, yes.
And I know at one point we were looking at redevelopment of that whole area, even across the street from Rocket.
Yes.
So if that goes through, I mean, there's nothing on the books right now, but if that goes through, is that road gonna be wide enough on Harrison to handle the load from both sides? Or does the road need to be widened?
I couldn't say sitting here, I don't think, the road is a standard width, I don't think that would be an issue. It would be a matter of, I guess, where you have driveways and turning movements that affect
Because
that.
you're gonna have now a lot of driveways coming out, you're gonna have, on Harrison.
I would say currently, there's no curbing currently, I believe, on either side, so it'd be an opportunity to maybe upgrade that. That would be something that potentially, if there's redevelopment, to say, we desire having slightly wider street or curbing along the sides, or whatever it is to make it more attractive, safer, better control vehicles from going onto a sidewalk, for example. Because the requirement of the redevelopment plan is to have sidewalks along there, to make that safer for pedestrians. The whole goal is to drive this area to make it easier to walk. Obviously, there's conflict with having cars going in and out driveways as well, but they are single unit driveways, not the, each one's for an individual townhouse unit, so it's low traffic that generates.
And then, I know there's only one hydrant on the corner of Frederick and Harrison. Is that gonna be able to handle that?
That would be the same thing to bring up during site
Okay,
plan.
good.
Certainly, I don't
Okay.
know, but in my experience, that's something that commonly comes up, and if the water, your fire department says, water company says you need it, do you have to do it? They'll do it, have to do it.
And I'm assuming they're gonna also have to manage the stormwater, because there's a lot of impervious coverage at this point compared to what's currently there.
Yes.
So they're gonna have to have on-site water management for the stormwater controlled into the stormwater system?
Almost certainly, I'm, again, not an engineer by training, I go to enough meetings like this
Oh, I
that I know
forget.
the.
Sorry.
The over an acre of, I know this much, it's always quoted, there's certain thresholds, like I think over an acre of disturbance and other things that kick in the requirements for either water quality, water quantity,
Only
that
reason I ask is
discharge, all that sort of
I
thing.
know when we were involved with the one for the Bristol, I know they had to put water containment on site because of the amount of impervious that went from
Right.
4 houses to
Right.
a huge,
Right.
I'm just curious.
And again, in this case, my gut is looking, if it's over an acre and, acre and a quarter, you're gonna be, to be moving moving soil around, they're talking more than an acre of disturbance, that's almost certainly going to trigger the state standards, which are very strict about, you have to reduce what comes off the site compared to today. I won't go into the details, I don't know the details, but I've heard enough of these presentations, it's basically to slow down the amount going
In all
off.
fairness, with the Bristol, there was a tremendous, because I remember that,
Yes.
sitting at the meetings, there was a tremendous backlash by all the residents on the back end streets because the property was going downwards, what's gonna happen with all that water
Right.
coming in? And I will tell you is that the design that they've created took care of all the water problems.
Oh, great.
No one had ever complained that they've received any kind of negative impact from Bristol.
Oh, no, I think whatever they did resolved, it made it better.
Absolutely,
That's what I
and I think
remember.
this will also probably make it better as well.
Okay.
Yes.
On the back, this drawing, looking at the parking lot behind the 3 units on Frederick.
Yes.
It looks like the parking lot almost goes to it's not gonna meet the setback for that?
Currently, in the zoning, you have a 5-foot setback,
Okay.
borough-wide, so you either have to get deviation for that or write to the plan, potentially change it, or they'll just have to adjust a lot to, and again, this is a concept, but I guess
No,
it's
I
laid
know,
out.
it's a concept
Yeah.
that just looking at the numbers.
It's tight, it's
It's
tight there.
pretty tight.
It's tight there, yes. Again, to the backside of the Rite Aid building, but nonetheless, so it's not a sensitive spot to have it that close, but yes, it certainly looks like it's within the 5 feet.
That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Joe, did you have some?
I'm still mulling it over.
Stan, you had some?
Yeah, I think Walter Gas come up with a plan for affordable housing. Number I heard was like 179 units. Could be more.
I don't have it in front of me, but it's a good sized number that was offered as a non-binding number by the state, and the mayor and council have to decide whether to accept that number or to offer an alternative if they have reason to believe with our guidance and analysis of how the state came up with that, it's a lower, but it's going to be a decent sized number as required.
I think we have to know by what, January 1st?
The filing's by January 31st, but yeah, it'll have to be in the works prior to that to figure out how and if to respond to that with a different number.
How many units of affordable would be within this?
If it's at 42, that's proposed currently, so if 20% set aside would be 8, just over 8, depends if you round up or down.
8 or 9?
8 to 9 is the intention, yes. And there would be, just to be clear, again, I don't want to veer too far into that, but there are a lot of credits available. There already were credits for rental housing in the prior rounds. Going forward, there's credits for transit-oriented housing. There's for redevelopment, it actually gets you extra credits. So in some cases, 1.5 units to 1, 2 units to 1, different. I don't have all the numbers in front of me, so you can avail the borough can avail itself of some of those credits to say if you had 8 units, it equals 12 or 16, depending which credits apply.
Oh.
Yes. So just to be clear, that's out. It's in the law. It's trying to incentivize redevelopment, transit-friendly development, that type of thing, for the affordable units.
What is the current state of this round in terms of municipalities actually being required to create the housing?
There are numbers assigned, so first to deal with that. Once you get past that, if you accept the number for your third round prospective need, that's the new typical affordable units, a certain percentage of them are supposed to be essentially realistic. Again, I don't know I wasn't preparing for a full-blown affordable housing discussion, but there's about a quarter of those units are supposed to be actually, buildable actual units versus the credits versus looking down the line at rezonings that may or may not happen. But all that said, the rules only came out in the past few months. The numbers just came out a month ago. DCA just released data just over the weekend showing how they came up with these numbers for the vacant land. So that literally just hit all the planners' desks on Monday morning to look at what that is.
And what's the time frame for those?
So again, the deadline of the January 31st is to say we accept or offer an alternative to the number. And then from that point, there's other steps where then it's filed and objections can be filed by but like affordable housing, advocacy groups, developers, interested public, whoever wants to do that. By the summer of next year is when this should be all in place.
In place, like people can move in?
Oh,
in
not
place?
the bill. No, to come up a plan to deal with your 150 units, your 120 units, 100, whatever the number ends up being.
Oh.
That the affordable housing plan for the borough would have to be updated to say, okay, we're going to do this, that, and the other thing. And again, not just you, every single town is going through this. It's unfortunate that the timing is what it is, but that's the law that was passed to set those deadlines.
Are there any laws for green space anywhere amongst the builds?
The affordable housing legislation is solely focused on that. It does not include and there's no requirements I know of that says at least should account for saving more green space.
Because I feel like some of this space should be green space.
Oh, okay, you're saying within this project?
Yeah, but I mean overall, a law that we're trying to keep some or make some or enhance.
That could be a recommendation as well. The current improved lot coverage is maximum 80%, so that means at least 20% is green, as in not a full-blown
Right.
green, but
Yes.
grass, trees, non-pavement essentially. So it's 20% set aside in the draft redevelopment plan.
When you, John, mentioned that the other side should be built on, my thought when we were together last time was that why would we have to continue to look at Rite Aid and its parking lot? But then Joe talked about all the parking spaces that people use there for town. I don't see how you can have this beautiful building, and then it appears that Lot 11 would stay the way it is. It just doesn't make sense. The 4 stories, for me, I think 2 stories is sufficient for the whole thing. I don't think that obtrusive top part needs to be there. I think it could be a whole smaller construction.
See, I disagree.
You know better than me, but that's my
So,
opinion.
You have to understand, this is in C1 zone, and as much John said that, he doesn't want to touch some of those residential units on Harrison Avenue. All of those homes but one is actually owned by a private entity. All the other homes are basically rentals. They're owned by individuals. And I understand that, through this, that there is a developer that is already in line to do some of these. And I think during presentation, when they came, they're working on that last unit, and hopefully they'll make an agreement with the potential, owner of that property. It's a little
Can you
bit
elaborate on what an agreement is?
Well, if the price is right, everybody will sell. Okay, I think that's the bottom line
Gotcha.
is that, the person that's living there, whatever they offered them initially, they came here with an attorney representing them. But bottom line is that in order for this, let's say, whole concept to work, they ultimately would have to have that one piece of property. The price is right, anything goes.
Understood.
But that's not my problem, that's their problem. We are talking about C1 commercial district. All those homes over there are actually legally non-conforming. If you look at the permitted uses in C1 zone, single family are not permitted. We do have mixed use, which allows certain portion of residential over retail, which this is proposed. And as far as the number of stories, in front of it, you have Rite Aid, and who knows what's gonna come of Rite Aid down the road. And then, behind it, you have Rocket Building Supply, and talking to the owner of Rocket Supply a while back, there are some plans that are in the works also for that particular property. When it's gonna happen, how quickly, I don't know. But I have a feeling is that the nature of what's been happening with the business, if you go over there, it's all locked up. Okay, I think you have to make a special appointment to go and buy a brick or two. So I think that business is kind of also going down. I wouldn't be surprised down the road, we might see another development be coming up, whether in front of us or the Board of Adjustment, for some kind of, concept to go over there. The fact of the 4 stories, when the train station on Zazzetti, came and for the approvals, again, the height of it was concerned, because on one side of Zazzetti was strictly all residential. And I think that building came out fairly nice, with that 1 story on train side being higher than the Zazzetti side. So I don't have an issue with this as being proposed. I don't have an issue with the 4 stories being proposed. I think if you look at the rendition of it, I think that the last 2 stories are kind of offset. I think there is some kind of terrace, although I wished I had a better rendition of the plans.
Yeah, that appears to be so.
That would have been nicer. I think we got a better plans from Hohokus Crossings than we got for this, but personally, I don't have an issue with this. I think, the vacant property on a corner, number 13, which is, the hair cottage right now.
That's 11, the hair cottage, isn't it?
Well, it's the number 13 West Prospect.
Oh,
That's the
gotcha.
address, but it's,
Oh, show off.
No, it's okay. There are certain properties that stick in your head, but
Yes.
anyhow, I think, I personally like the concept. I think, hearing from homeowners and everything else, Waldwick taxes are high. We just had a conversation, about a different piece of property in Waldwick, that the taxes are, ridiculously high. And I think by having some of these forward concepts to come forth, ultimately can help to reduce maybe the burden that unfortunately majority of homeowners have to carry. We do not have a lot of commercial and industrial presence in town. So personally, I don't have an issue with this concept. If this was in the middle residential area or something, absolutely I would. But you don't have any residential other than the ones that we're actually discussing.
So Joe, then, on lot 11, 13 Prospect, the 5 townhouses in the back are basically, what's it, 100 feet off the front roadway, that whole property.
My understanding, that's one building. There is no separation. Paul, am I right?
Just to be clear, I believe the existing building would remain and would not be connected. I've seen a few concepts that have been
Okay.
thrown around that locate that part of the property.
And
And that lot's deep. It's
But it would
almost
be-
200 feet deep.
But that lot would remain, is part of the area, I believe, under control or potential control of the
Is-
redeveloper.
is-
So it would not be an issue, in other words, it'd be within the same lot that there'd be the closer setbacks to each other.
Right, so 13 Prospect building is gonna stay.
That's the idea, yes.
And then the back end of it is gonna be made into townhouses.
Right, where you currently have just pavement now, and then the parking would be picked up in the parking lot itself versus,
Is the parking lot open or is it covered by another story?
again, the current concept shows that that's covered as you come in, so it's like underneath the building and then it opens up in the back.
And it
The
opens-
entire area,
it's
yeah,
open
this
in
is
the
not a
back.
covered,
Okay.
yeah, some redevelopment concepts you'll see the whole podium and build above it, this is not at all that. It's
Okay.
open air in the backside of all those townhouse units. Madam Chair, if I just go back, the question about affordable housing, I just want to be clear on the record. The redevelopment plan says 15% for rentals, 20 for ownership, so that would be 6 to 8 units if that's the standard applied. If it's all rental properties under the current language, it's a lesser set aside.
Oh,
The idea being there's a greater demand generally for rental housing for affordable units, so you try to incentivize by having a lower percentage. That's the standard statewide, typically 15%.
thank you.
20. I just wasn't, sometimes it's 20 across the board, but here we're having a separate standard.
Thank you.
Paul, are you assigned like 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, or 3 bedrooms, or is it just?
Yeah, it's all on the
noted-
sheet.
It's noted on the sheet.
Look on the,
No,
yeah,
for
yeah,
affordable
Of the
housing?
affordable,
Oh.
again, there's also a formula that has to be followed, that of the units, a minimum of 20% must be 3 bedrooms, of the affordables only, just to try to, so people don't just, typically most towns would say do studios in 1 bedrooms, the idea being that you want them for families as well. So a minimum of 20%, and again, not in Waldwick, everywhere in the state would be 20% 3-bedroom minimum, maximum 20% 1 bedrooms. Then remainder is essentially 2s, or it can be a combination of 2s and 3s, or, yeah, there's a minimum, maximum of those different. Again, I threw a lot of numbers there, I apologize, but there's a set formula for all of that. And that's in the ordinance currently today in Waldwick as well, as again, most other towns.
Just want to comment, Joe, you made some very valid points, though, about tax ratables and that whole area for redevelopment down there.
Another thing too, which I mentioned during the previous meeting we had, is that the parking at Rite Aid, a lot of the businesses on West Prospect literally rely on those parking spaces. If you just hang out there for an hour every day, you will see the amount of traffic, foot traffic, that basically happens across the street for a lot of those businesses, retail, that don't have their own parking. It's
Right.
barely a street parking. And I think that if something were to happen to that property, and if it does in the future, I'll be the first one to cry for some of those parking spaces to be left open, because ultimately, I think some of the existing businesses probably would struggle tremendously if that parking lot wasn't there.
Did mayor and council ever consider a municipal lot? I mean, is that something that Waldwick
Yeah,
would?
I'm not gonna speak on behalf of mayor and council, but one question I have for you, where would you create that lot? There is no space,
Right where it is, where they're
but that's not,
parking for free.
but that's a private property. That's a private property that is owned, and I will tell you is that for private property, I'm thrilled that it's
Right.
not being enforced, that Tollway
Right.
is on.
For sure.
Okay, I think they've been
Yeah.
great neighbors, even though the parking lot really is in bad shape, but as far as being neighborly, I think you can't ask for a better neighbor.
True.
John, the post office has like 8 or 9 trucks in there on any given day. Take up a lot of
Well,
spots.
again, here's the corner business. You know, the guy on the corner of Walter Hammond and West Prospect, he services all those trucks. So when they break down, and it seems like the post office fleet is probably older than me. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of them, so his parking is overflow on Rite Aid parking lot.
Yeah,
Again,
but he's also got a lot of cars on his
Local
property.
business.
that
I
have
agree.
been sitting there for like 2, 3, 4, 5 years, because the guy's a car collector. You know,
I agree.
If he got rid of half of the cars that are sitting in his lot, he'd be able to park some of those post office trucks in there. and work
point
on it.
well taken.
I'm not crying for him.
But,
You know, he's-
but that's, what I'm trying to say is that a lot of businesses rely on that parking lot for their regular day-to-day operation.
Well, I think if they were to focus on the Rite Aid and that corner, that would be a consideration, and that should be worked into the plan.
Yeah, I agree with John. I'm not convinced that the people that live in building, lot 1, 3, 5, 7, and 8 are all one guy. I'm not convinced that one guy owns all 5 of those houses. And I'm not convinced that,
I think
if you go in there and strong arm and
Joe,
tell them, we have a we have a
I
plan
think,
we
I
have,
think
if
there
we want you to
are
sell.
3 owners between those homes.
How many?
I think there are 3 owners.
We
For
have
5
the
houses?
list.
Correct.
Okay, so you still got 2. What are you gonna do, throw all those people out on the street?
No, but they're rentals. There is one entity, one home that is owned outright by a family, but all the other ones are rentals.
Okay, so if you put up a building like this, okay, I went to Allendale and I looked at the Vale in Allendale. I went to Hohokus and I looked at Hohokus Crossing. And it's not called Hohokus Crossing, it's called 619 North. I don't believe the
Hey,
people of
gentlemen,
Hohokus allowed
just
that,
let's
I
do
don't
one at
believe
a
the
time,
people in
please.
Hohokus allowed that building to be built in the middle of their town. It's way, way oversized. The whole bottom floor is parking garage. It's all, and the parking garage, it's like a 30-foot ceiling inside the parking garage. I don't know why it's all like that big underneath. And the Vale in Allendale looks like a mental asylum. I think it's horrible. But they have a community center. They have a nice community center. And they have a nice gym, and, I'm sure that was part of the project. So, you know what? I don't know. Who paid the architect to draw these up? This architect that made this drawing.
There are no names on these papers.
What's that?
I don't see any names. Anybody
Well,
see?
an architect had to draw this.
Oh, sure. I surely didn't draw it.
So who's got the juice that paid the architect to make this conceptual drawing? Do we know that?
I can't tell you.
It's gotta have an architect's name on it, who made it.
I think it's a rendition just to give you an idea of what's being
Well, somebody
proposed.
rendered it. Did you render it?
No, I didn't.
I didn't render it. It's
But,
a very nice
but-
picture. It
but-
shows a nice brick building,
But Joe,
storefronts.
in all fairness, anytime when an entity comes for any kind of approvals, whether it's planning board or zoning board, you will have renditions to get an idea of what it's supposed to be looking for. Because if that didn't come in front of you, you'll be asking for it. Can you show me what it looks like?
Well, a 40-foot building this large, right here in Waldwick, I've lived in Waldwick for 70 years, I think would look way out of place. Maybe cut 20 feet off the top, maybe this building would fit in there and be appropriate.
That's what I said.
But this is way large. And I think the one in the middle of Hohokus is way large for the middle of Hohokus. I have nothing to do with what people do in Hohokus.
I
And
think
the one in
more,
Allendale, the Vale, and let's talk about rents. So you're talking in the Vale in Allendale, they were getting a two-bedroom apartment, $4,000 a month. Okay? Waldwick Station, which we have down by the railroad tracks, a studio, $2,300 a month, and a two-bedroom goes up to $6,000 a month. Okay? 619 North in Hohokus, that's this
Yes.
Hohokus Crossing. One bedroom, $3,250 a month. So these would be nice for people that don't live around here, who have a lot of money, who want to move into Waldwick. But for the people of Waldwick, the people who live in this town, who might be looking for an alternate form of housing than buying a house, I don't know. Unless they hit the lottery, I'm just gonna go and afford it.
So what do you propose, just chop it off and still?
Well, no, you said we're gonna have to come up with affordable housing. Okay, 20% of these apartments are gonna have to be affordable. That's 1 out of 5.
You said what, 4 to 6? 8?
6 to 8, it's 15% for rental housing is the current standard, 20% of ownership.
And who sets the income level of what would be affordable and non-affordable?
There are formulas that originally came through COA and now through DCA at the state. That is 80% of area median income for the whole housing region. It has to be affordable to a household earning that. I can go down to detail. There's a number that applies, so whether it's here or in Ridgewood, in Hohokus, in any town, or for that matter in Jersey City, which is part of your housing region, the rents are set according to a regional calculation. So you have
Yeah,
there's
and
no
the
discretion
cities-
for the borough to set that.
The cities like Union City, Newark, and Jersey City, who don't have any land to build on, the state says, well, if you don't have any land to build on and you can't possibly come up with those units, all the towns in New Jersey have to divvy up those units and come up with that housing, right?
It's a separate issue, but that's pretty much a good summation of the way the state law works currently as it's written.
And I mean, if Waldwick doesn't have, or, what happens to Waldwick now if we don't have the area to redevelop? Or we don't, in order to do this, you have to knock down existing housing. So we don't have any open space that you can build on. So what happens then? If Waldwick says, well, we don't have any open space to build on, how are you gonna penalize us? What are you gonna do to us?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, right now, the law's there, and it's going to have to be addressed in one way or the other, or there are challenges. Again, I don't want to go too far afield there, but there are a few legal challenges floating around out there. Some towns in your vicinity,
And
Montvale and others, are challenging it in court. Other challenges are coming with regard to the methodology. For now, the laws are on the books, and the deadline that next looms is January 31st to say how you'll address these numbers, or if you accept the numbers, and then how you address them.
And when this
Either
goes
one.
back to the mayor and council, I understand that they are gonna have powers of condemnation. They would be able to condemn properties to make this happen. It's their,
Voted on.
So, back to what Joe was saying as far as, and you Adele also too, is knocking it down by 2 stories. I will tell you is that no developer is gonna come over here to purchase this property, to develop it, to have 2 stories building. Nobody will wanna touch it. The economics today will not allow it.
Really?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There has to be a point of a return, break even, and ultimately everybody's in a business to make money. Okay? By reducing this by 2 stories, I will tell you this will be dead. If you just come up and say, this is maximum height that we'll allow in that area, then we're gonna be staring at that corner lot, that's empty corner lot, and all of those homes till kingdom come, because nobody will touch it. Unfortunately, it's the economy and the reality that we live in today.
We don't know how many units are in the third, or the fourth floor.
In this concept, I don't believe so. I don't have any floor plan for it.
Because I mean, looking at it, it looks like it's kind of 60% of the third floor. But if they went to the full, and didn't do the full setback, would that allow them to get those apartments on the third floor?
There's a lot of determination.
I know,
The
it's
shape
just
of the
a
building
concept.
and such, it doesn't always lay out as easily as you think, but it might,
No,
you're right,
yeah.
there's ways you can cut up units to fit, yeah, it's a really good question.
Or they could go around where the townhouses are and continue apartments on 2 floors without the retail space. Eliminate the townhouses and have apartments on both first and second floors, all the way through to around Frederick.
I think because there'll be separate buildings, I'm not sure from a zoning perspective whether that's permitted, because, you know, in C1 zone, a mixed use is permitted, so it's almost by default, you have no choice but to have retail below and apartments
Oh, yeah,
above.
retail is good,
Yeah, so.
where it is. And then continuing on Harrison, where the townhouses are, and Frederick, that can continue to be a 2-story building. And eliminate the
I
2.
think that's a concept that ultimately is past than what we're trying to achieve over here. I think what we're trying to achieve over here is ultimately come up with with the height, number of stories. And if let's say, because we seem to have some division over here, but that is the number one concept that we're trying to achieve. Ultimately, if you, let's say, approve or disapprove, depends on abuse, as far as the concept, you can always ask for that during, let's say, a true site plan approval. But at least they have a set firm building height, number of stories, and things like that, that this is actually what's in front of us today.
Yeah. I think Hohokus is a bit obtrusive. I went there today, and that's what I thought. And really felt awful when they were building the place, because I thought, this just doesn't belong here, but now it's there. What kind of population, how many people would be living here? Do we have any kind of number? I mean, are we talking, like, it's hundreds?
No. If 42 units, there are calculations that you can use multipliers Rutgers came up with, that's based on
Because how
actual
many,
built developments. It's gonna be closer to two per unit. You know, some of the smaller ones might be less, some
we have 3
3
bedrooms?
3 to 4. I don't wanna guess, but it's not hundreds, because if it's even double, we're talking in the
42
80s.
apartments, you said,
80 to
yeah.
100 people, again, real rough numbers, just based on
Yeah,
the
I
type of
thought-
development it is.
I thought it was like 200 people, but that's good, less is good.
Yeah, the 21 townhouse units would maybe be a bit, even there, they're not really that large, believe it or not, for a townhouse product. These aren't like the ones you see in Hohokus over there with or Saddle River, the real high-end like that. These are smaller, more compact, almost like a more urban design, walkable design, not, big wide open property.
So the townhouses are gonna be approximately 24 feet tall?
Now, they're showing it 3 stories, so it'd be more than that, because the garage is underneath, so they're
Probably
closer to 40, actually, just
Probably
30.
very similar to, Mark, to what you have at the Pickle, and also too is that the 3 that were just built on Zazzetti.
All right, so 10 per story on the,
So you got
Rough.
the ground floor, which is the garage, and then you have still 2 floors above it, plus the attic.
Yeah, these are flat roof ones they're showing on the concept, so it might be a little bit less.
And Joe, just to give you an idea, the 3 units that were built on Zazzetti, the rent on those units is over $6,000. It's crazy.
Who's living there, Donald Trump?
No, then it would have been probably 12,000, but, no, but it is.
Well, it'd
yeah.
certainly be bigger on paper anyway.
It's, so, when you say as far as the the prices that our people are paying, it is outrageous, but this is what market dictates today, and they filling them.
I'll jump in really quick. I don't want to try to get too far afield, but again, just for context, I agree with the rents. In my experience, I'm a planner throughout central Jersey. It's frankly crazy the amount of luxury housing that's been built, improved in the last 10, 15 years. I always keep saying, when's it going to end?
Yeah.
There's really a huge, at some point it's going to have to happen, but the demand and the high rents keep going because the state is just underbuilt in areas where it's desirable for people to live, where there's downtowns, where there's transit, where you have parks and good schools, that type of thing. Again, in Bergen County, I do work in Union County, Essex County, forget even Hudson County and more urban areas. I'm talking
Right.
pretty much all suburban, older suburban towns similar to Waldwick in terms of age. So in some cases, it's larger units that pick up people that sell their house and want to maintain a residence and then can keep a place in Florida or elsewhere down the
Right.
shore, but have a place closer to home, and they can afford it because they sold their house for a good return. In other cases, it's younger professionals who want to live close to a train, be able to go to work and maybe have one car instead of two for a couple. So there's a ton of demand for this. Waldwick's frankly a little behind the curve, but that's fine. It's a smaller downtown. I understand why there's been resistance to it. But if you just look around anywhere, there's a train station and a downtown and a town with
Yeah.
good schools and a nice, it's nice housing stock, nice parks, everything.
Right.
There's demand for this type of thing.
Is the station at capacity?
I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's,
There were 6 open units when I checked about 2 weeks ago. And I don't know what the total number of units in that building.
I think there was some 80-some units over there, if I'm not mistaken.
There were only 6 that were available, and they were different sizes. One was a 1-bedroom, and I think a couple of 2-bedroom.
The developer there, at least one of them, was Russo.
Correct.
They have a chain, a brand called Vermella. Go look it up sometime. They're probably in 25 different towns now next to train stations. Very nice product actually too. And I live in Union County in Garwood, right next to the train, next to Union train station, 3 to 4 stories. But they just have realized they can just take this and replicate it
Right.
all over the place. And
Right.
maybe it's kind of a cookie cutter maybe, but
Right.
they're finding they can make money somehow building these 3 to 4 story buildings close to transit and downtowns and get these kinds of rents.
Look what happened in Ridgewood by the train station. It's, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Look at that one.
Where Seal Fonz was. And
Yeah.
I told you.
Oh,
It's-
yeah.
it's-
Where the Brogan
And
Cadillac
behind the
was.
Y, there are all
And-
kinds of
and
new
so-
buildings over there.
This is smack in the middle of, commercial,
Yeah.
so it's not affecting anybody who, a single-family homes. Granted, in order for this concept to take, you're dealing with some homes which are legally non-conforming. Right now, it is not a permitted use in a single-family home in C1 zone, but it's,
Well, they were conforming when they got there, when they originated there, yes?
Predated.
And then ordinances changed. So they were there first.
Well, on this proposed plan, how many different businesses can you put on that first floor there?
Sure, 4,000 square feet, I mean, could be one large one, but more likely 2 or 3. Just given rough sizes of the tech plan. And I will say, it's hard in these mixed-use developments to, because the rents they need to charge for them, that's always an issue as well.
Right.
So often I just see it vacant for a time because everyone wants the mixed use, but
Right.
you pay all that, like Joe said, the economics, it costs a lot of money to put that in, build parking, and have a nice storefront, and suddenly,
Right.
you're charging twice as much as you'd be paying just up the street.
Yeah, how many businesses have we had at the station? This is the third in there? That little crepe place
You know,
The-
Soma Cafe.
that's there?
the cafe, and that
She's
cafe
doing well?
is doing
Good.
great.
Oh,
Good.
They found a niche.
Wonderful.
They're doing great.
If you
Good
can do
to
that,
hear.
that's excellent.
Yep.
Yes.
But yeah, it's a very small scale retail. It's just the idea to have something that's active. You walk by and it's not just a brick wall. You have storefronts, some activity hopefully.
So if the townhouses are 40 feet, and you eliminate the top floor, and you go with 3 stories total on the apartment complex, that would create a sight line the same right across. Because you're figuring 14 foot, based on the drawing, 14 foot on the retail space, 10 per story, that would be 2 stories would be 34 plus the parapet, you're probably talking 4 to 5 feet.
Yeah, that's
Typically.
about right.
So then you're talking around 40 feet-ish.
That's-
And then the
that-
townhouses
yeah.
are around the same size. And sight lines, if you look down the street in both directions, even including Joe calls it 13 East Prospect.
Yes.
That's a little shorter though.
Yeah.
It's,
That's a little short.
That's a
Lot
two-story.
11.
It's a two-story building, but
Rough numbers, yes,
It's
the only difference.
actually West Prospect.
Yeah.
actually, you're right, it is West Prospect.
The townhouse units are stepped, because the parking in front, you've got 20 feet in front of them, so it wouldn't, it'd be a similar height, but pushed back from the street, versus if it was apartment style, you could pull up farther, closer to the street, but that would give you a different type of urban design feel. The idea being here to try to kind of give a little more space in front, but, yeah, but as far as height goes, it'd be roughly the
Similar
same.
to the townhouse.
Yeah, town's probably slightly shorter, because you don't need as much on the ground floor for the retail. The idea is the retail in the garage has to be higher. But I would typically write a plan like this is 3 stories, 40 feet, to allow for that ground floor plus everything is said. And we're at 4 stories, 50 feet, so I think the top, yeah, each of the upper floors is roughly 10 feet, so you take off 1, 50 down to 40, yes.
Then you're still adding 10 for elevator shafts, HVAC, all that stuff too.
That's in there just as it's a typical exception, just because you'll usually need that for the elevator, yeah, for that type of, but it's limited to a certain amount of roof area, just because, by nature, you don't need a lot of that. Yes. That could be a recommendation as well if there's an issue with that, but that's very common to have that kind of language.
All the outdoor decking there on the second floor, is that people can actually come out of there?
That's my understanding of it. That's usually a nice selling point. In some places, it's communal. Here, if it's in front of units, it usually would be individual unit owners, or renters have their own.
Outdoor space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They get that from. I just keep pictures of Vermella one near where I live. It's it's like that. It's on the 3rd floor there, and you see the apartments have a little deck so it steps the building top back. Has a little communal outdoor space. And this one, the proposal, it's very common, is to have a rooftop amenity for the residents as well. So just a place where you can have a sun deck, maybe a grill or whatever type of thing, fire pit, that type of thing usually on top of it. I haven't seen a detailed plan showing that, but that's a very common amenity in these newer multifamily buildings.
On the terrace portion, not on the roof.
It could oftentimes be on the top roof, or in this
As
case,
well.
it's a 3rd-story place. It could be
Oh.
on that one. I've seen it on top of, the 4-story buildings, 5-story buildings. Again, nothing's designed like that yet, but that's just to be aware of that often is a selling point for that type of places. It provides a little more outdoor space too, just to your point, Jerry.
Paul, anything?
I'm just kind of listening.
Corey?
Same.
He's smart. Well, all we can do is make recommendations. And then hope for the best. I mean, it's up to mayor and council what happens, but then it comes back with the site plan and next steps.
Or at the next meeting, we decide, which is next week, I think, or the week after,
Yeah, after Thanksgiving.
to move it forward to council or not move forward. Is that correct?
Well, we have to move it forward either way, even if this board says this thing is an abomination and we think it is absolutely the wrong thing, it still has to go back to mayor and council.
Right.
And in fact, as a practical matter, that letter needs to be pretty much a draft for the next meeting, for the December 4th meeting, so that it can be forwarded in a timely fashion. So we really kind of need a sense of the board at this point in terms of what the board's recommendation is going to be.
So,
You
am
know-
I feeling like we're being rushed, like John said, or is it just me?
No,
And
you are being
John?
rushed. You are being rushed,
I mean,
But
is there a
part of it-
time frame that we're,
yeah,
The statute does have that.
45
Oh.
days from the
since we
referral.
started?
Since it was referred
Since
to
it
you.
was referred to
Since it
us.
was referred to
And
us.
we, frankly, when we got it, we were being urged to decide it at the last public meeting.
Right,
And instead, we kind of
yes.
slowed it down and said, we are still in good shape if we make our recommendation
Right.
on December 4th. But to do that, need to have a feel for what we're going to do. concept consistent in general with the master plan. And it seems reasonably, doesn't seem unreasonable to argue that it is generally consistent with the master plan in terms of the use, in terms of the idea. When you get to the specifics, is, you know, like they say, the devil's in the details. So my inclination would be to pen something saying it's generally consistent Now, there seems to be a lot of pushback about the size, ultimately. We're talking about 42, are the townhouses conceptualized as rentals as well? Do we know?
I don't. Typically, the product would be, of course, sale, but it's not, they're not individual lots, so in this case, that makes it different. That's a really good question.
Yeah, you'd have to either create a homeowner association, create a condominium, in essence.
It'd have to be some other mechanism.
Yeah.
A lot of them do, Cliff, even 2 or 3 units, you know,
Yeah,
a lot of
no,
times
I've
they
seen
sold
that.
individually, but they do create
I've seen
HOA.
mansions broken up into
Correct.
units
Yeah.
as condos.
Yep.
Yeah, fair enough.
Um,
I just don't know what the proposal is.
We do know the proposal, however, is 42 units, 42 residential units, 4,000 square feet of retail, and 81 parking spaces where 120 are required.
Well, to be fair, the redevelopment plan has a lower standard, so it matches that. It does not match the current, does not comply with the current zoning. The redevelopment plan allowed for reduction for the factors I mentioned previously, the proximity of transit, services, stores, and the mix of uses, and shared parking. But that's also fair game for you to consider whether you agree with the reduced standards or not. So it is what's proposed there, it complies with this plan, but not your current zone.
Right.
Well, they could park at Rite Aid if there's not enough room.
Right. I mean, down the road, that certainly redevelopment projects do have public-private shared parking, which works very well. So that could be something on that or other sites to keep in mind for future reference. You definitely have that kind of mix where they set aside a certain number of public spaces. But not on this property. That's not
Right.
that's not what's proposed in this particular lot.
What else, Cliff, please?
There's something that's nagging at me, and that is that it was suggested to this board that when the original area needed redevelopment included condemnation power, that was being done to guard against the bankruptcy of Rite Aid. And it seems to me that we're not looking at, that this plan is not looking at Rite Aid, and in fact is really leveling the guns of condemnation power in favor of this other side of the area. In other words, I'm not privy to who's playing footsie with who in terms of the properties. But my concern is that this board explained to the public one thing, and this condemnation tower is going along with something else.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Can I ask a question about condemnation? Just for clarity. Condemnation carries through even with the new owners, correct?
Just to be clear, the whole redevelopment area
All
agree.
redevelopment
Resale
areas
part-
under, you have a condemnation clause.
The possibility exists because of the mayor and council's adoption of the redevelopment area that's based on your recommendation.
Which means that if all said properties are sold to one entity, that condemnation right also falls under the new entity. If he doesn't develop the property correctly, it can be condemned.
Theoretically, yeah, I think that's fair.
Condemnation,
It's still there, the power
The power of
remains.
condemnation holds true to hold the developer to developing the property, said property, to the standards that the planning board and the town determines, correct?
I don't want to give a definitive answer on that without having the facts in front of me, but
The
generally
condemnation right
speaking, that's the
doesn't
idea.
move away. It's
Of
not-
course, yes, that's right.
You know, if you condemn the property, then you basically control.
Right, and the other issue with redevelopment was that the governing body can act as a redevelopment entity, essentially, that can enter into contracts or agreements with property owners and say, you do this, and you have things you have to do, and if they don't, they can rescind the redeveloper designation, for example. That's one of the benefits of it, that you can,
So you look at.
towns can do that and say, yeah, you know what, you're not living up to the end of the bargain, you lose your ability to
So like
build.
Rutherford didn't do that with their, redevelopment plan. And then once the developer got in, he decided to make changes and they couldn't do anything about it, to some extent.
It could, yeah,
He met the letter of the law,
Right.
but the bare minimum.
that can happen, yes.
It can happen, but if you have condemnation rights, it gives you control of that said redevelopment area to eternity.
Again, in general
Unless you
terms, that's the
change-
idea, yeah, well, yeah.
Yes, unless you change it
Right.
at any other time.
It expires at some point out there. I think it might be 30, 40 years in the future, maybe
Yeah,
as a
but
sunset
30,
clause,
40
but
years, that's a long
you're,
time.
you're looking a ways out. It's for the foreseeable future.
Something else could be going there in 30, 40
Yeah.
years, who knows?
Yes.
You never know. Might get better technology.
No, I think you make a very good point. I mean, when I voted yes the first time I voted, based
For the
on
whole thing.
the big picture that, and in my eyes, I saw it right. It's an eyesore, it's ugly. Joe, you made some very good points about the parking, and that needs to be considered. That, yeah, we need to redevelop this. And that's the pretty side, or that's the side that needs to be cleaned up. That's the most visible part of our town, the Franklin Turnpike and Prospect. You're gonna get the most bang for your buck right there in, as far as beautifying the town, your storefronts, that's where you're gonna get your walking traffic. You're not gonna get it on Harrison, not to the same level.
It's on Prospect.
On Prospect, okay. But still, you're not gonna get it like you would on Clancy Turnpike, right on that corner. And now I see it, and it's on the backside of, it's different than what I was sold in the beginning, to your point.
Also creates sort of a dead spot before you hit the redeveloped
Yes.
area.
Plus, you did mention it's consistent with the master plan.
It doesn't appear to be.
Generally
And that's,
consistent.
look, that is really that is a planner's opinion. And I think it would be reckless for this board to discount the planner's opinion in that regard, without having a really, really solid basis for that rejection. And I don't see one off the top of my head, but y'all are the board. So if y'all see one, articulate, as they say.
I think it could be made, readjusted. They need to level it and make it 2 stories across the whole board. Where the townhouses are, that could be 2 stories of more apartments around. That's Prospect, that's Harrison, and Frederick.
Can I ask a question going back to an earlier regarding parking? Site 11, it looks like the haircut place is staying there.
The building is
Yeah.
supposed to remain, yes.
But we're also taking all their parking away. So now we're adding, what, they've got like 14, 15 spots back there. Now we're adding a new burden of parking for that place.
Right, the parking would be, according to this concept, essentially within the public, underneath the building, you see some spots as well as in there.
So they would fall within the new development?
Yes,
That
the-
parking, okay.
Yes, well, the parking, yeah, is supposed to be picked up, that's actually a really good point, that they should be calculating the requirement based on that floor area, just because, it's on the property, so it has to apply whatever the 1 per 400 we're saying there, would have to apply to that building on the ground floor as well.
How many apartments are in that building?
Which one?
Don't-
Oh,
13,
Thirteen.
13
Above-
West Prospect.
Just one
13.
apartment?
Okay, just one.
Just
apartment.
one, yeah.
One apartment, and then a small, probably, was it 400, 800 square foot, ground floor, or something, it's not very large.
Right.
Still sharing clothes.
Yeah.
It would be, there'd be a requirement for a couple spaces, though, probably for that one.
Yeah, because they have
Yeah, but today,
roughly 14, 15 spots right now.
Yeah. It's a trade-off.
Sure.
Yeah, the driveway is certainly substandard how to get in and out, but yes, the idea is to put it in an actual functioning parking lot.
All right.
Are we,
One last question. Is there any other developer interested in this area at all?
That I don't know. I know there's been, obviously, someone interested who's been moved a concept forward. I'm not, I just don't have any knowledge of that.
Well, what kind of performance requirements are normally put in place in this sort of thing? Is there anything beyond standard performance bond or?
Oh, you mean for, once you get to an actual full-blown
once you get
plan? There can be a range of public benefits that are negotiated, whether it's with regard to, the sidewalk, as I mentioned before, the curbing or sidewalks, streetscape improvements, new lighting, landscaping. Sometimes it's, again, public parking signs falls under that. Again, not in this particular site most likely, but
right,
that's oftentimes something, bicycle facilities, you name it. In addition to just other time measures, deadlines as far as building certain things, or how projects phased in, so you can't just sit on a property for 10 years and do nothing. There probably would more than likely be a negotiation about how long it takes to do certain things and what your milestones are. Those are all things that could be considered.
What are the tax implications to something like this?
Depends on what the mayor and council decide to do. If they utilize, if it's a standard, under current taxation, most likely the value will go up because the improvements, the value of the land, I guess that wouldn't change necessarily. If there was to be a long-term tax abatement or pilot, that would be a different story as far as how that works out. That's a whole different calculation.
Aren't these things typically done with a pilot?
It can be. It's not. That's one of the powers that's out there. I've seen it done with. I've seen it done without. Sometimes it's short-term tax abatement of 5 years. But a large redevelopment project, it depends what the ask is. If it's something that's a really contaminated site, for example, that really needs a lot of money poured into that, usually is something that justifies that. In other cases, it's just because of high cost of land or some other public purpose.
You gotta understand, I grew up in Paramus, and I watched every one of the big retail areas get tax abatements. And as soon as the tax abatements were about to run, the story became, oh, well, you let these other guys in, and now they're more modern, and we've gotta keep track. We've gotta keep up with them, and if we don't, it's just not gonna work. We need to continue the tax abatement because of that. And somehow these tax abatements have a way of just staying in place and staying in place. concerns that I have listed based on what I'm hearing are the size of the building, the proposed size, the height in
The
particular.
height.
Also, some questions about the parking, especially since this doesn't appear to have accounted for 13, which is part of the site.
And can we say about that we thought it included the whole block, and now it doesn't?
Well, I have a question. If we vote no on December 5th, or whatever the date is, okay, if it's a majority vote, I assume, right?
Yeah.
So if the majority says no, what happens?
That well, Cliff, I guess you get, so the
What-
recommendation gets
what
sent back.
Negative
and then-
recommendation?
But it still goes to the council?
The
Just say-
well, the recommendation. All this- all
Recommendation
this-
is no?
All this board is doing is making a recommendation to the council with respect to what it has been provided with in terms of a
Okay.
proposal. That
What's the
recommendation.
45 days then?
The requirement, the time with which, within which this board has to respond, has to put that recommendation
Okay.
up, down, sideways, whatever it is, into,
So if we said no, and it goes to council, and council says, or council says the recommendation from the planning board was no, then they can.
we find out, you find out what your recommendation's worth.
Right.
They can still override that, right?
Bingo.
Right,
Absolutely.
okay.
Right.
I just want to know what the what
Yeah.
if.
Right.
Right.
And for that matter, if you don't take action, the 45 days elapses, they can just go forward regardless then. So by putting something on the record that's contrary, at least you're putting your thoughts out there. If you just let it, if you didn't meet in time or whatever, decide not to act, you can do that as well, but just, obviously, you don't get a shot at offering suggestions then.
Right.
And we tried to make sure in structuring the timing that we would.
I understand.
Makes
I
sense,
just
and
wanna
that's why we're
understand
here
all the
tonight.
scenarios.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
What's the possibilities?
Of course.
I think it's.
But
good
it's
that-
not necessarily shutting anything
No.
down, stopping it.
We don't have
For
that
better or
power.
worse, this board does not have that power.
We don't have the power.
Let's put it this way. Think about those occasions when the Board of Ed comes before this board with projects. And it's, for all intents and purposes, courtesy. Because this board has on various occasions, when a lot of work was being done over the high school campus, suggested that the continuation of sidewalks from Wyckoff Avenue to Prospect along, yeah, exactly. And yet, are there sidewalks? No.
What else?
What I have.
Mark, anything specific?
I mean, it seems like everybody's concerned about the height, parking.
Also, the issue of not working on the part of the track that's perceived by the board to be the most in need of development while focusing on another part of it.
Right, and that's where we started.
Right. Yeah, we started.
I mean, but I think we need to look at it that, yes, the whole block was part of the redevelopment plan. But right now, we're looking at a proposal for these particular pieces of property. No one's proposed anything for the other stuff. So, yeah, that might be what the board prefers, but
But
at
that
this
was
point-
part of the original,
No,
Well, no, I
no,
see-
the
I see what
redevelopment
Mark
says
is saying.
this zone, you can redevelop,
the zone.
the zone. So anything in that block can be redeveloped. Right now, the only proposal we have is for the said 8 properties,
Right.
and they have a plan to do X, a proposal, with changes to the current C1 standard. And that's what we're looking at. And whether we agree to it or not, the planning board has to give an opinion, to state what you like and what you don't like, and then the council will vote on it. We can't get
Anything
caught
else
up
we
in the
missed?
whole Rite Aid Park, because right now, no
Well-
one's talking to the town about that.
We don't like the fact that it's not in there.
I
so
understand that,
We can say
but
that.
it's-
Doesn't, may not matter, but
A
we
zone,
can say that.
a zone doesn't encompass, not all the entities have to be
Yeah,
done at the same
understood.
time. Am I right with that?
Yes.
So you can
Yeah.
It's
get
whatever we
one
get.
part
I mean,
all
somebody could have
done.
came back with half those properties and said, I'm gonna do this.
Right.
And that's what I wanna do. They came back with this, so.
Clear.
Mark, that's a good point.
I mean, eventually, there's other properties that are potentially looked at as a redevelopment zone, but that, at this point, we stopped that because there was no interest, if I remember correctly. Well,
The other areas are designated.
no, they're designated, but there hasn't been any interest from a developer
Hasn't moved forward to a
Yeah.
formal plan.
to a formal plan like this draft.
I think part of the reason for that not happening is because you have a lot more individual owners than all the other properties versus this one.
Oh, I know, and bigger lots.
Not sure.
This is what's on the table.
Cliff, you have what you need?
Well, the question is, I need a clear sense of the board. Do you want the recommendation? And maybe, why don't I lay it out and perhaps have a voice vote so that you all know whether you're in the right ballpark or not. It sounds like the recommendation would be to acknowledge that the proposal for the 8 lots in question is consistent, is generally consistent
Consistent.
with the,
Master plan.
with the master plan. However, the board specifically recommends against going beyond the current zoning height, meaning a maximum of 35 feet, 2.5 stories. And further, that despite the proposal for reduced parking requirements, the parking envisioned by the master plan, envisioned by the proposal, must be reevaluated, particularly in light of the fact that it does not address the existing use at 13. The addition, and finally, that the board has concerns about the fact that although understanding the nature of the situation, it is concerned by the lack of comprehensive redevelopment for the entire tract. In need, for the entire area in need of redevelopment, as opposed to this limited tract. those were what I got out of you guys. Is there something more that should be in there? And is that consistent with what you want to send to the mayor and council? That's what I need.
I'll just ask a question. So if the, if the board recommends no based on the height, just as a hypothetical, and the mayor and council follow, they accept that recommendation, does it kill the whole thing? I mean, Joe was saying it's not economically feasible for a builder to consider this.
Well,
So what happens at that point?
well, that's a very good question. The issue really is, anyone who has worked with developers and or negotiated with developers knows that like any other negotiation, what someone says at the outset may not be where they're willing to come down in the end. There are great stories about this stuff. It's the stuff of legend. I know a developer who was going back and forth with Halden years ago and wanted to build some nice condos. And they said, well, yeah, that's a good idea. And he said, okay, here's the plan. And the borough said, oh no, that's way too many units. And he said, okay, I can work with you on that. And he cut it back. And the borough looked and said, no, it's still way too many units. And he said, look, I can shave off maybe one or two more, but at that point, it becomes untenable. It just becomes no longer economically viable. And they said, well, no, it's a done deal. You cannot do that. And he said, okay, well, I'm not going to develop it. And he sold it to a house of worship. And the irony there is, by so doing, the municipality lost the tax revenue entirely. So the cautionary tale there is that you can cut off your nose to spite your face. But by the same token, I have a little voice in my ear that I always take with me. It's my mother, who used to say, you don't ask, you don't get. And you never know what's feasible or what isn't feasible. Nobody is going to propose less than they really want, but what they really want doesn't have to be what they really need. And that, for better or worse, that's where the borough council comes in. That's their bailiwick. And God knows we've got enough people on our council and in the mayor's office who are savvy enough to understand this stuff. And just because one side says something doesn't mean that's where it winds up. So that is the long answer to a short question, Paul.
Thank you.
So we want to move with a voice vote?
Need some kind of form of guidance. I mean, I've laid out things, but
Yep.
half the board may look and say, no, that's not what I wanted to say.
Anyone need to hear Cliff repeat what he wrote or will write?
Did I just say something or am I allowed?
Technically, you're not allowed.
But it's a little confusing what he's doing right now. You're not voting on nothing, but you present this at the next meeting to the presidents that are gonna be here for them to hear what you just said and then make a comment.
True, absolutely. But at this juncture, the board needs to have some idea of the direction it thinks it wants to go in with the letter to the council. That's all. And subject to modification. Look, you may hear a voice from the crowd that just completely turns your head. And in that case, there's no final vote here, so.
No, and the letter is not final, it's just
And-
preliminary.
Well, the letter, in other words, you may want to shift where the letter's pointing, based on what you hear or what you all say in a week and a half. And that's doable too. There's nothing that says we can't amend the proposed letter and get it out in the morning after the meeting.
And that's
My
just-
recollection is that the time runs on that Friday, so,
December 6th.
yeah, that's, I think, what I calculated.
So this is the initial draft, but it can be changed
Yeah.
based on what the public meeting.
Based on public meeting,
So that-
your regrets over Thanksgiving dinner,
And this
whatever.
was for discussion, and
Yeah.
to bring it to the final.
And we're still not allowed to discuss this, keep that in mind, outside this meeting.
Absolutely. This is a discussion of the board in arriving at something. This is still an open matter before the board. As such, it cannot be discussed by y'all with members of the public, nor can it be discussed by y'all in groups, small or large, because to do so is a violation of the Open Public Meetings Act. Once a matter is open, any and all commentary has to happen here.
Are we allowed to speak to people that will be directly affected in this area?
No.
We're not allowed to gather any information about public opinion, about what people,
You really should not.
well, then how are we supposed to form a responsible judgment?
We hope that the public comes and tells us.
So we're at their mercy if they don't show up at the meeting.
It happens
We're
all
not
the
allowed to
time.
gather
That's-
that infor- we're not
happens
allowed
all
to
the
gather that
time.
information.
People don't come. Yeah,
When it
Too bad
affects
for
them,
them.
people come. You know that.
No, they'll pack this hall when the mayor and council say, hey, we're building this because we want to lower taxes and we need this money to come in.
Yeah,
Then
they
they'll
say
say,
Or
Too
they may
late.
say, we decided to live in Waldwood, not in Ridgewood, not in Allendale.
so as a board member, I can't
You
speak to
really
anybody
should-
that's going to be affected down in that area.
You
down.
really should not. It opens all kinds of snake pits. Because you
I
are,
don't think that's fair.
because you are a member of the board,
what the law is, what's fair is very different.
ain't that the truth?
Oh,
Joe, because you're a member of the board, the things you say have more import. And as a result, they get taken and they get run with
hmm.
a lot more than if somebody else says something. And that's how boards wind up in trouble and sideways with big chunks of the population. Because there's commentary coming out. Because it's look, it's impossible to ask someone, what do you think about this? Without getting into a discussion. And once you're in that discussion, what you say or don't say may or may not be accurately perceived. And God knows, when somebody starts saying, well, I was talking to Joe Orbetz and he said, by the time the third person says, well, Frank was talking to Joe Orbetz, and you know what it's gonna sound like. We've all been there, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna be nothing like what you said,
Right.
but you're
But the
gonna
guy
have
telling a secret to him and he tells a
Yeah.
secret to
Bada
him. By the time
bing,
it gets down
telephone.
there, it's nothing like
Telephone.
considering.
Come on, we all played
It's
that game.
good not to put yourself
We're
in that
the age that
place,
we played
Joe.
that game as a kid.
understood.
All righty?
Makes sense.
I'm not trying to be,
I know, I understand.
That's separate.
yeah, exactly. I am, but that's.
Let's
that's not what
move
this
on,
is about.
gentlemen and ladies. We're up to,
Okay, we're up to, is that the sense of the board? What I suggested
yes.
a little bit
Now, would we
ago.
like to ask each of us, yes or no?
Sure.
Before we
I-
do that, I have one ask. For the next meeting, can we find out how many units are on that top floor? Because I think that's part of the whole thing, how tall it is, how many units is that really taken away?
The only thing I would say with that is you're considering a redevelopment. The concept plan was trying to give you direction as what it looks like. I wouldn't read too much into how it fits within there, just because it can be, like I said, but you can design it to have a bunch of one-bedrooms up there, you could have 2, 3 bedrooms, penthouses. Your concern is more providing parameters for how it looks for height. I understand the reasoning for the question, I just would caution against getting into that detail,
Right.
because it doesn't have it's not a formal site plan to you, it's
Yeah.
just a concept that's drawn up that looks pretty or not, whatever you think of it, it's a concept, and it's a matter of,
And a site plan may come in looking entirely different.
right.
And is there, did I read somewhere there might be an opportunity to have someone come and present, or that's not? Craig mentioned that? So we have to think of that. Did you read that email?
It is absolutely up to the board. The question becomes,
Yeah.
are you
I'm not sure.
reasonably confident that you understand what's being proposed? And if you are, then you probably have enough information
Yeah.
to make the decision on what recommendation to make to the council. Because you will get a second bite at it when there, or you or the zoning board, depending.
Right.
Presumably, it's gonna come here because it's not gonna need a use variance.
You can't, the redevelopment plan won't allow for any kind of D variance.
Exactly.
That's typical in redevelopment, it's either you comply and you can get C variances if you need, or you have to amend the plan.
Yeah.
So it will not be a
So-
zoning board matter, planning board only.
Exactly. So,
So we will have an opportunity to hear from,
if and when there's a formal plan, site plan, yeah, it's gonna
oh,
go
that
through here.
far down.
Well, it's, assuming, you know, step 2 is our recommendation, step 3 is what the mayor and council does with it. And then, assuming as we like to say arguendo, for purposes of argument, that the mayor and council say, okay, yeah, we're okay with this idea, then it becomes, all right, need to make an application, and the application will
Is
be
it the
for a site
redeveloper
plan.
that would come? May I ask your opinion, Paul, what you think about having the developer come here?
Well, it's, like I said, it's a plan that is intended to give you an idea of the scale of it and what the use would be. I mean,
And you think we've exhausted
Well,
all that we
I mean,
could?
in fairness, I was gonna say, you've gone above and beyond as far as getting the public's involvement. There's no formal requirement for a hearing or any public feedback on this stage of the process. Typically, it's the board just looks at it in one night. Again, not to say you have to do this, Cliff gave you good advice that you have 45 days, you can do it as you see fit, and you're allowed to get public comment. Oftentimes, it's just, yeah, it's consistent, and we want you to lower the height, do this, that, the other thing, send it right back. As far as the benefits of having a redeveloper there, it's,
We would just be asking some of the same questions, and then we might come up with a few more.
yeah.
But I'm not
suppose-
sure, I was leaning towards it, but now I'm not so much.
in my experience, it's not common to do that, just for that reason, because
Yeah.
even
I'm
if
not
it's,
sure.
you know, because because again, there's no, unless it's something that they're saying, we'll give you our word, you're gonna see the exact same plan down the road if you like it.
Yeah,
That's usually not the case. This is, by nature, it's not the case, because they haven't,
Right.
engineered it to the nth degree and see what actually fits on a site.
Right.
I'm sure they have ideas, but
Makes
once you
sense.
start, coming up with stormwater management, everything else, and
Yeah, no.
driveways, it really changes. So,
Couple of that perk tests and all goes to hell.
there's a lot of things to do.
Right.
You might have a tank in the
Okay.
ground or something else, yeah, whatever it is, yeah.
Good, thank you. So is it just a yes or a no, or can there be a caveat with it?
There can be a caveat.
Well,
Absolutely.
I'm saying no as proposed. Joe,
Well, I agree with the letter that Cliff wants to
we
present.
need a yes or a no in addition to
Then my answer's no.
Stan,
Yes.
John?
I'm on the fence. I'm in agreement with what Cliff has written as far as a recommendation, but I'm leaning towards no.
No as proposed or no as?
And no is proposed, yes.
Very good. Mark?
I don't like the 4 stories. I think the 3 stories is a better solution.
And that would be a,
No.
thank you. Paul?
I agree with Mark.
And that would be a,
No.
Corey?
No, I agree with these two.
Thank you. We're good?
Did you forget me?
Oh, Joe, so sorry, Joe. I thought you went to 13 West Prospect, is it?
My answer is yes.
Thank you, sir.
I know
Sorry.
changes
My
difficult
bad.
to come by, but
No, it doesn't, it's all what we want, so.
Okay.
Anything else?
It sounds to me like I'm writing pretty much what I suggested at the outset.
Yes.
That while this does appear to be consistent with the master plan generally, specifically, it is not what the board does not approve it based upon height, parking, focus.
Right, if you have to be specific, then,
And can you add it's consistent with area that needs to be redeveloped? Or is that consistent with
That's where it
master plan?
starts. That's where it starts.
Okay.
That's exactly what I started with. While it is consistent with the master plan,
Right.
generally consistent.
like I say, it's not gonna be a final letter when we come in here. It'll be subject to tweaking.
Well, a lot of us might be the first time for a big project like this, so I think that's why we're
Sure.
mulling it
Absolutely.
and really milking it and
Absolutely.
making the mayor be tortured over there in that chair, but, sorry, Mayor.
I'm doing a recliner.
You need a recliner, I know. Thank you for being so patient. But, yeah, so some of us, this is the first time, and I think it's important that we do what's in our hearts and what's best for Waldwick, and some of us are still learning as we go. So I appreciate all of your input, and we'll be back a week from Wednesday, December 4th. I hope we're all in attendance. Mark, not you.
Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving, y'all.
Yep, and happy Thanksgiving. Mark, you're not here on the 4th?
I gotta see what my course schedule is, depending on what I'm doing for class.
All right,
Be able to blow it off.
sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Good night,
Happy
everybody.
Thanksgiving.
Uh,